In Peru, social movements and labor unions have called for new mobilizations in Lima and in the interior to demand the resignation of President Boluarte. At the opening of the second Russia-Africa summit in St. Petersburg, Russian President Vladimir Putin pledged to send free shipments of grains to several African countries. Niger Prime Minister Hassoumi Moussaoudou assumed the interim presidency following an armed coup, while several world leaders condemned the coup and called for democracy to be upheld. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Ana Marrero from the teleSUR headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. Public with the news, stay with us. On Wednesday, corn producers in Argentina reported first positive impact of the measure put in place by the executive branch. The electronic platform for the information, grain trading and exchange operations and the publication of reference prices confirmed that the sales of Argentine corn were close with more than 800,000 tons in just 2 days. Likewise, the Rosario Stock Exchange stated on its official website that maize was once again the most dynamic curve, showing a good presence of participants and stable prices for nearby deliveries. On Wednesday in Ecuador, fighting gangs announced an alleged peace agreement in the province of Esmeraldas after a prison riot that resulted in massacre. The director of the Esmeralda prison, Ivan Toledo, participated in the announcements via video on social network in which criminal bands announced the truce. The Tiguerenos criminal organization joined the alleged peace accords with other organizations operating outside the law in Ecuador. In Peru, social movements and labor unions have called for new mobilizations to Lima and in the interior to demand the resignation of President Boluarte. The new round of protests start on July the 26th and will prop up on July the 29th. The General Confederation of Workers of Peru, the National Unitary Coordinator for Struggle, Union Leaders and University Students Federations are some of the organizations rallied to demand the advances of general elections and justice for victims demonstrators. On Wednesday, El Salvador's Legislative Assembly approved transitional provisions to allow for mass trials of persons detained under the emergency regime, a reform to the law against organized crime. The transitional provisions for ordering the prosecution of defendants, official explains, will allow detained to be trained in groups. Instead of individual cases, there will be collective trials in which gangs membership will be judged and different crimes will be charged. Canadian Premier Justin Trudeau on Wednesday removed 7 of his ministers, including the head of the defense portfolio, one of his main advisors on Ukraine conflict. According to the Canadian government, the cabinet reshuffle is attributed, among other things, to the low approval ratings that Trudeau administration has paid in recent months. Out of the 23 ministers of governments, the Premier also got rid of the heads of migration, justice, public safety, health, and transportation. Let's take our very first break, but remember you can now follow us on TikTok account in English, where you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Stay tuned for more news. Welcome back to From the South. On Thursday, the second Russia and Africa summit has opened. President Vladimir Putin described the state and perspective of relations between his country and the continent in a number of areas and his opening address. The second edition resumed the exercise launched in 2019 with the aim of developing a global dialogue and consolidating a platform for cooperation. 49 delegations from Africa, state, regional and sub-regional integration associations such as the African Union will be present. At a humanitarian economic forum will also be held, where it is expected proposals will emerge to improve the distribution of grain and fertilizer from Russia to African countries. At the opening of the Russian-African Summit on Thursday in St. Petersburg, Russian President Vladimir Putin pledged to send free shipments of grains to several African countries. President Putin drew attention to the fact that although the so-called grain deal with Ukraine was initially meant to assure the global food security, to reduce the threat of famine and to help the poorest countries, only 3% of those exports actually reach African countries. Whereas 70% went to high-income countries.
In the coming 3 to 4 months, we will be able to ensure free supplies of 25,000 to 50,000 tons of grain to Burkina Faso, Zimbabwe, Mali, Somalia, Central African Republic, and Eritrea.
In Siberia, the local branch of Russian Emergency Situations Ministry reports 6 people have died in a helicopter crash in a southern region of Altai.
Settlement of Tyungurd in Ost-Kosinski district. There were 16 people on board, 3 crew members and 13 passengers. According to preliminary information, 7 people left the aircraft on their own, 6 people died.
Beijing urged the North Atlantic Organization to dismiss the role of nuclear weapons in ensuring national and collective security. Chinese Defense Ministry's spokesman Tan Kefei called on the military alliance to abandon the obsolete Cold War mentality, stop fabricating false narratives, and to take concrete steps to dismiss the role of nuclear weapons. The Chinese officials said facts have proven that the United States and NATO are the greatest sources of risk and a factor of instability for international peace and security. Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg announced that NATO member countries have agreed to jointly resist China's growing influence and military power. The economic outlook in the Eurozone has deteriorated, European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde warned on Thursday after the institutions implemented a fresh interest rate hike to meet inflation.
Near-term economic outlook for the euro area has deteriorated, owing largely to weaker domestic demand. High inflation and tighter financing conditions are dampening spending. Inflation continues to decline, but is still expected to remain too high for too long. We are determined to ensure that inflation returns to our 2% medium-term target in a timely manner. The Governing Council, therefore, today decided to raise the 3 key ECB interest rates by 25 basis points.
The wave of fires raging in the countries of the Mediterranean region has already claimed 4 lives and caused millions in losses. The fire has destroyed homes, nature reserves, tourist properties, and in cases such as Greece, Italy, and Croatia, it has caused damages worth millions of dollars to the tourism industry. The flames are spreading in Croatia, Italy, and Portugal. Greece and Algeria have recently managed to bring in the fire under control, but is still active in many places. The director of the Copernicus Climate Change Service, Carlo Tempo, has said that the high temperatures we've experienced this month of July in the northern hemisphere may put to this month as a whole being the warmest on record.
Hottest day in terms of the global mean temperature, they have all occurred this month. This anomaly is so large with respect to other record-breaking months in our record that we are virtually certain that the month as a whole will become the warmest July on record, the warmest month on record.
The demographic of nations around the globe is dramatically changing. Growing population in India and Africa are leading to greater development, but both are facing other consequences. According to the UN, China's populations will continue to decline and will fall below 1 billion before the end of the century. The key to this trend, as in Europe, has been fertility. Africa, for its part, is a continent with the fastest and youngest population growth. UN demographic research shows that 70% of Africans are under the age of 30, and this is happening while many of the developing countries are experiencing a fast population aging. Let's take our last break, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English, there you will be able to watch our interviews, sub stories, special broadcasts, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. One financial break, don't go away. Welcome back. Nigerian Minister of Foreign Affairs Hassoumi Masuru assumed on Thursday the representation of the country as interim head of government, reaffirming his rejection of the coup d'etat. As soon as Masuru made public the announcement, he reiterated that what happened in the African nation has been a violent coup d'etat, qualifying the actions of the military as an act of faction improper of those who have a commitment with the nation. Likewise, he called to avoid violence and asked the Democrats of the country to support the overthrown government. Niger's army has declared allegiance to the defense and security forces that overthrew President Mohamed Bazoum, according to the statement signed by Abdul Suruki Issa, the army chief of state. Members of the Presidential Guard had detained Bazoum inside the presidential palace in the capital by 9 early on Wednesday. In a statement broadcast later on national television, Colonel Major Amadou Abramene, spokesperson for a group calling itself the National Council for the Safeguarding of Niger, said the country's border has been closed, nationwide curfew has been established, and all institutions in the country were also suspended. On Thursday, speaking at the Russia-African Summit being held in St. Petersburg, African Union President and Comoros President Azali Assoumani said he condemns the recent coup attempt in Niger and urged for the release of President Bazoum and his family.
The African Union, in a communique condemning what has happened in Niger and recommending the restoration of constitutional order and the release of President Bazoum and his family.
China has also stated it was closely following the situation in Niger. This was stated by the Chinese Foreign Minister spokesperson Mao Ning at the daily news briefing.
We are closely following the development of the situation in Niger. We also know the relevant statement made by the African Union and the Economic Community of West African States. We call on the relevant parties in Niger to act in fundamental interests of the country and its people, resolve their difference peacefully through dialogue, restore normal order as soon as possible, and safeguard the country's overall picture of peace, stability, and development.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres demands the release of President Bazoum of Niger following a coup in the country.
Spoke with President Bazoum to express our solidarity. Today, I do want to address directly those who are detaining him. Release President Bazoum immediately and without preconditions.
The Palestinian Health Ministry has confirmed the death of Fares Abu Smar, the Palestinian teenager who was shot in the head by Israeli forces during an assault in the northern West Bank. The occupiers came to suppress a protest in Kalkia. There, the residents were rejecting the invasion of Al-Nakar neighborhood. The Israeli military fired rubble cotton live bullets, one of which hit the teenager in the head. According to the Health Ministry, 202 Palestinian citizens have been killed by the occupying forces so far in 2023. On Thursday, thousands of illegal shooters accompanied by the Ben Gif began storming the cold city of the occupied Al-Quds to take part in the provisional Israeli flag march. According to local media, more than 1,000 illegal Israeli shooters spearheaded by the police minister Itamar Ben-Gvir stormed Al-Quds most as part of commemorating the so-called destruction of the temple. Israeli occupation forces deployed heavily inside the old city since the early morning to secure the shelters, incursions and close the perimeters of Bab al-Mawr in the occupied Al-Quds, where hundreds of shelters, mainly arms, arrived while yelling racist chants. On Wednesday, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas met twice with Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in exchange in Ankara, Turkey, hosted by Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The Fatah party leader and Haniyeh, who leads the Islamic movement from exiles, exchanged first alone and then with Erdogan in the presidential palace behind closed doors. Local media report that Erdogan reaffirms the importance of strengthening solidarity and unity among the Palestinian people, as well as the commitment to the two-state principle. We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our socials from Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram as well. For Telesur English and from the South, I'm Ana Marrero. Thank you for watching.